Hi there. My name is Manuel Silva and I work for Ikea. I'm coming to you directly from the beautiful Swedish countryside to show you how you can address some of the biggest problems that companies face today when dealing with open innovation. My goal with this session is to share some of the things that I've learned throughout my journey over the past 8 years. Working for companies like Electrolux and Ikea has given me the chance to engage with hundreds of corporations, SMEs, startups, and even universities. I've been in the front lines and seen all the dynamics at play, and I'm hoping that you find value in what I'm about to share. Should you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. That being said, let's get started. And what better way to start than with a short story? So let me tell you the story about two guys living in San Francisco that, just like many other, were looking for a way to make some extra money on the side. At the time, there was a design event coming up, and seeing that there weren't enough hotel rooms available for everyone, they thought, why don't we rent some of our free space? And so they filled their apartments with air mattresses, set up a website, and sure enough, they got their first 3 clients. However, when they tried to replicate the experiment with different events and having other people listing their own apartments all over the city, they struggled to get any traction. At some point, they were even selling cereal boxes to keep the company going a few more months. That company was called Air Bed and Breakfast. The idea came up in 2007, but fast forward to today, their company is valued at around $30 billion, and you might know them as Airbnb. In a similar fashion, other companies were popping up. Companies like Uber, Slack, WhatsApp, or Instagram. Now, these are all very different companies, but they have one thing in common, and that thing is that they were created during the Great Recession or just shortly after. This comes to show that even during the most critical times, there's always space for innovation. And much like before, we are now at a turning point again. There's no denying that we are going through the biggest economic downturn in living memory. The global pandemic has only accelerated the situation, and as markets get squeezed, we see companies struggling to stay in business. These are hard times, there are no doubts, but did you know that back in the 16th century, being called an innovator was actually an insult? You could be sent to prison for innovations against the church, and if that wasn't enough, they would even cut your ears off. Now, those were hard times. Fortunately, we have come a long way since then, and nowadays, we all want to be praised as being innovators. And just like the meaning of the word has changed, to me, innovation in itself is change. And I even dare to say that I think that every company wants innovation, but very few really want to change. And that's the problem, because the two things are very much connected. Innovation is no longer optional. It has become a necessity. Just like that, changing the way you work is a necessity too if you want to stay relevant. One quote from Darwin says exactly that. He writes, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but rather the one most adaptable to change." It's just on point. And right now, we need a new wave of innovation. The rippling effect across industries has pushed many companies to try different areas and different business models. We see car manufacturers like Ford or Toyota now producing ventilators. We see restaurant booking apps such as OpenTable instead being used by retailers as they need to regulate the number of people inside their stores at any given time. What if these companies stay in these new markets afterwards? They will create a whole new dynamic of competition. And while history is full of innovation failures, failing doesn't mean game over. Remember that success is not final, just like failure is not fatal. I'll give you some examples. So, Electrolux was the first to introduce the robot vacuum cleaner back in the early 2000s. However, the final product was very unreliable and it was way too expensive. So, when the competitors arrived with a better offer, they didn't stand a chance. And even Ikea, back in 2012, they launched an all in one entertainment center, which was basically a piece of furniture with an integrated TV and home theater. But this venture was not successful at all. The TV was of bad quality, and overall, the software experience was just as bad. So, it was not well received. The takeaway here is that it's the companies that learn from these mistakes that eventually succeed. And I believe that using an open innovation approach can definitely play an important role in all of this. Open innovation is very well documented, and there are no shortage of good and bad examples out there. However, my experience comes from working in multinational companies with strong brands and market positions. So, some of these aspects may not apply to you. This is not intended to be a playbook, but instead an overview of some of the mistakes and misconceptions that I've seen repeated many times over. The first big mistake is thinking that open innovation means free innovation. It is hard to understand the reasons behind, but I see it repeated especially when big companies are engaging with smaller companies, and they feel that somehow they are entitled and have all the leverage. Imagine you're driving around in a nice neighborhood. You come across a sign that says open house. Okay, you wouldn't just move in and claim the house as being yours now, would you? You need to pay for it. It may be more or less expensive, but definitely it's not free. So be fair and humble. It is true that doing open innovation is a way to lower risk, but that doesn't take the costs out of the equation. On the positive side, though, there is no linear correlation. So just because you're investing more into open innovation activities and projects, this will not guarantee you better results. Many also think that open innovation is just another process. In my experience, what's most important is the mindset. It's the behavior and the attitude that really counts. You see, when you have people with the right mindset, they will always find a way to make things work, even if sometimes not in the most efficient way. That's when a process and right tools come into play. You can have the mindset without the process, but not the other way around. And if you continue instead focusing on the process with hopes that all of a sudden it will fix everything, you will eventually run into process fatigue, where people will simply roll their eyes and disregard whatever you're trying to implement. The takeaway is that the process should be created to adapt to your company, not the opposite. Another recurring theme is that only startups are allowed. Somehow, if you want to do open innovation, then you must only engage with startups. Well, to me, a strong open innovation strategy goes beyond startups and takes into account other ecosystems. There's plenty of innovation in the academics world, in small but established companies, and many other institutions. On top of that, corporations usually look for startups as a source of ideas. But you should remember that it's not about the idea, it's about the execution. I'm sure everyone has tons of ideas, and that includes your competitors. So it's not the idea itself, it's how you bring that idea to life. And in fact, often it's the combination of different ideas that paves the way to something new. Take Apple, for instance. Very few times they are the first to market. However, their execution is usually on another level. And look at electric cars. They have been tried many years before, but somehow Tesla seems to have cracked the code. Remember that one idea isn't less valuable just because it's a better version of something that exists, or even something that has been attempted before. Open innovation should support and accelerate the execution of those ideas. Steve Jobs once said that creativity is having enough thoughts to connect. And in my opinion, you can only have enough thoughts by looking outside your company walls and beyond startups. Then, there's what I call innovation placebo. I see lots of companies starting with smaller activities but not taking them seriously. For example, organizing hackathons or setting up an accelerator program just for show, without real commitment to implement anything. It gives you the taste of innovation, the feeling that you are innovating, but without tangible results. Even running an internal activity, such as an idea challenge, only for employees. In some cases, the best ideas are even awarded. However, most will remain just that, ideas on a database. Also, you may see companies setting up innovation labs, filling them up with inspiring furniture and playful decoration, only to become a showroom or a fancy meeting center, instead of a place for people to collaborate and co-create. And that's disappointing. Another common placebo is assigning an innovation director or creating an innovation team, and then placing them in the traditional environment constrained by the typical company structures while expecting them to deliver immediate results. You probably have recognized some of these points, or even all of them, and you may be asking now, what can we do? So let's go through some suggestions that I think will help you to overcome these issues. And the first one is adapt a strategy to your needs. I know I said earlier that there are plenty of examples out there, but what works for some may not work for others, so try not to copy-paste. It doesn't mean that you need to reinvent the wheel. Instead, take a look at your own company and make the necessary adjustments. I usually recommend a learn-by-doing approach, where you learn step by step, you iterate quickly, and you adapt the strategy as you go. And with time, you can even lay out a roadmap to plan for the evolution of your own open innovation strategy. Next one is setting clear expectations. You should be ambitious, but try being realistic at the same time. And I know it's a hard balance to strike, but nevertheless, you should try to do so. Some of the most important work you'll do will be managing expectations. So make sure every stakeholder is aligned with them since the beginning. Don't overpromise, don't fake it until you make it. As you need to build trust and reputation inside the company, you should be transparent. This will also ensure that you get the continuous support from top management, which is vital. Keep in mind that failure is a necessary outcome to the learning process. So align the expectations to that and be upfront about it. Then you should create a success story as fast as possible and use that to leverage other parts of the company. Remember, you don't need everybody involved since day one. Start with smaller projects and with people that already share the same mindset. You may even find that your company is already doing open innovation in some way, shape, or form, but you may call it differently. It is important to have trusted relationships, and you get that with transparency and results. So build your community and deliver value continuously. With time, this community will speak for you and become your own satellites inside and outside the company. And lastly, while everything I mentioned so far is important, having a culture of innovation is what will ensure the long-term survival of any company. It's not just about having an inspiring company vision and strong values. It's about having people with the right mindset committed to that vision and those values. Here's a few things you can do to build that culture. You should celebrate failures for what they are, which is an opportunity to learn. Some companies even organize project funerals or failure festivals where they honor the lessons that they learn. Also, be aware that hierarchies are natural enemies of innovation, and that transparency will help you build trust. You should be open about your strategies and the contribution that each person has to it. This will bring people together and help them move in the same direction. There are so many reasons why open innovation projects succeed or fail. Many of them are out of your control. The behavior, however, is always there, regardless of the outcome. So my advice is to focus on rewarding the behavior instead of the results. And this is especially true when you're starting out. Reinforcing your company culture or even changing it altogether, it's a long road to take. But I strongly believe that a company culture that promotes collaboration, transparency, and trust will always win. And once you create this momentum, it's very hard to stop. As my closing message, I want to emphasize that this is the time for innovation to shine. In challenging environments like this, companies have a unique chance to experiment with new ideas and approaches. This crisis is creating new consumer needs and a sense of urgency from top managements that is rarely seen in any other occasions. Not just that, but during these times, consumers are more open to try new things, and usually they are much more forgiving when things don't work out. So, in a way, it is actually less risky to experiment instead of standing still, waiting for the storm to pass. Take a look outside, beyond your company walls, and find ways to make things happen. Focus on the opportunities emerging from the uncertainty. This is the perfect time for innovation and to collaborate and co-create a better future. Be part of the solution and do something great. I hope you have enjoyed this session and that you have found some useful insights. Feel free to connect with me for any questions you may have or just to continue the conversation. Thank you.